disconnection is very important to your idea of existentialism, right?
Yes, definitely. Pablo feels as though his life didn't matter and he can't think of it. He's preparing for death and for ceasing to exist. In the morning, Tom and Juan are taken away, leaving Pablo alone. Then the phalangists come and get him, and again ask about Ramon Grease. Pablo chooses to lie and tell them that Grease is in the graveyard. Then, there are orders given to give Pablo a civil, rather than a military trial. As it turns out, the phalangists found Grease hiding in the cemetery, where he had fled to be safe from being ratted out.
So, why did you choose the Spanish Civil War?
Because it woke me up to world events. Before then, my contemporaries and I were in a bubble. With the rising tide of fascism, I realized I didn't want that in France, and I certainly didn't want a war. If anything is meaningless, it's war.
So death is the center of this play. What did you mean to convey?
I meant to convey exactly what Pablo realizes. Death is an unnatural part of life, yet essential. People say that teenagers think that they will live forever, but the average mind has this idea of immortality. That's where the gray comes in. The prisoners turn gray. Grease is Spanish for gray. It's the unnatural being of death and the realization that life will not go on forever.
What does the wall itself refer to?
In plain terms, it's the wall that the men line up in front of to be shot. It is also a figure in Pablo's dream, and it shows his alienation from others.
The three men are very different in how they face death. How does this add to your argument of existentialism?
Well, Juan has that typical case I mentioned before. He never imagined death and is in a state of lament. He feels trapped by his impending death, but death would come for him anyway. Tom almost pretends that death will not come. He chalks circles around it, but he forms the same detachment that Pablo does. Pablo has the full detachment. There's stages of realizing death.
So, not accepting death?
No, they do not accept death. Just as death is an unnatural thing, accepting it would be unnatural too.
In the end, I know that Pablo accidentally gives away Grease's location, from what you've told me. What's the significance of that?
Well, in life, to have a full grasp of it, one must make decisions. Pablo did not know it, but his lie decided between his life or Grease's. He was playing Russian roulette without knowing it, and he won. However, he did know that even minutes from his death, he could still change the course of others' lives. He set the guards on a wild goose chase, didn't he? And part of this was because he had power over them. They threatened his life for not telling them the location of Grease, but it was a ridiculous threat. He would die either way. So there was nothing they had over him. He had already detached himself from this world. Pablo had the upper hand.
Very interesting. So, another fictional work that I would like to ask you about is your first novel, Nausea. What is the main idea of this work?
I wrote this story through a main character named Quentin, who is a historian writing a biography. He becomes frustrated as he begins to question if what he is writing is factual and objective or his own creation. He takes this thought a step further and he begins to struggle with all existence.
So, why did you title this work Nausea?
Quentin struggles with understanding existence and the uncertainty of life. This gives him nausea, but not the mild type with which many are familiar. Instead, he has the form which causes him queasiness, disorientation, and to hate everything. He cannot convince himself of existence because as it was real, it was also superfluous and incomprehensible. It is this conflict that makes him stick to his stomach.
So, what did Quentin come to learn about his nausea?
He realizes that his sense of freedom is what gives him nausea. By existing, we are free, but that is complicated. We are born without choice, but the rest of our lives we are shaped by our choices. For Quentin, this freedom to choose is too difficult of a problem for his thinking.
How did you use this novel to explain your tenets of existentialism?
Nausea shows how we are living in a meaningless world. Trying to make sense of life's order of events is baseless, but we have to manage our existence. We have to understand three things. Number one, it is impossible to understand the world that we live in. Number two, but we live in the world and we can't escape it. And number three, as humans, we have a need to understand why we exist. With these steps, we then acknowledge that our lives are arbitrary and we are completely free to decide our way of living in the world.
What does completely free mean?
We have to make choices, but there is no guidance for them, and the consequences of these choices are unavoidable. In other words, our decisions make our life. Roquentin realizes that his decisions are solely responsible for his life, and he finds this too difficult, which gives him almost perpetual nausea.
Thank you very much. That was very interesting. Now we're going to go on to more of your philosophical works, which will be explained by our next reporter.